Okay, once again we're on the topic of counter deployment. The best way to deal with a firearm threat is early, before it is on target, before you have to worry about a discharge. He has to get it out, he has to deploy it, he has to point it at you. So now we've gone from a weapon in the front to a hip carry to a very common street scenario is the small, the back carry. And now depending on where he actually wears it or how long you have, he may have his hand quite far deep, or it may be on its way out where it's already exposed. So we looked at how to grab the wrist. Face me again. So when he goes for it and he starts to pull it out, his hand is already fairly far this way. You can do the same grip from here. Okay. Now is your hand in the weapon? So if you feel it coming out, you're going to do the same one we just did. That's probably the best way. I can, depending how tall he is, I can put my head under, or I can simply pull it out that way, doing that same vertical wrist lock action. Okay. Now if you catch him early and his hand is really far back and he hasn't got it out yet, pull it out. I use the same position here as we talked before on the elbow. That makes it hard for him to pull it out. Okay, that buys him the time. So basically I'm going to come in here and do it the same way as we did from the front, but it's in reverse. I can hold it this way, I can hand block that if it comes out here. Perfect. So I'm basically in that same cow hand we did before, but I do it in reverse because we end up behind him. And again, it's not important that I lock the guy, but if I crank him hard, it's going to break his balance and I can start to strike with the weapon. Okay? So again, the way I was taught at some of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academies, as the guy reached, they were putting the hand this way, using the same principle as as blocking the holster. The problem with this, though, if I end up in the small of the back or I end up behind the gun, pull the gun on it. It can still come out and you can go into the arm. So in the end, you can end up here. There's ways to work with it, but we found it was just too problematic to try and treat it as a holster, try and just use your arm. So when the guy goes here, it's better to go here, boom, actually grab the wrist. And again, if I catch it in this position, you can go to the Kimura again. Nothing wrong with that. Now again, this time the weapon came out in the hand, so just be aware that you got to stay out of that field of fire. If that starts discharging, you don't want to be catching the muzzle blast. All right, so that's one option to grab the wrist. If your arm is back really deep and you can't get, either early jam it in this way and then use your second hand behind here. You should be able to pull it off fairly easily. Okay, this time it came out. Again, you can end up in that same, basically, that same cow hand position which we did from the front, but you end up in the rear. Okay? Now, as we mentioned, if you're late, and the gun's already 3/4 of the way out, you're in that same vertical wrist lock position, right? And just come out that way. All right, if you're able to get behind him in that situation, that's even better. So the guy's kind of deploying it, you realize a little later, boom, if I get underneath this arm, again, be aware of the field of fire. If I can step behind him, I'm creating a lot of leverage on his thumb, the gun's going to come right out. I'm getting pain on his wrist and shoulder, which means he's thinking about that, not trying to counter me, and I end up behind him, which is a tremendous tactical advantage. Okay? How to do that one from here. I'm going to go behind there. So again, it goes for here. I end up here, bang, so I can go underneath. You end up in a good position. Bang! Alright. So that's deployment, counter deployment from the small of the back. These are the classic ones that have served a lot of people well over the years. You see them both in combat sample and Jiu-Jitsu.